Transform your life with these 9 Stoic disciplines. Let's be honest, our world can feel like a chaos factory. It's a 24/7 assembly line, churning out stress, anxiety, and that sinking feeling of being powerless. Every notification, every news alert, every algorithm seems engineered to hijack your attention and stir up your mind. In a storm like this, is it even possible to build real mental toughness? Or are we all just supposed to get swept away? But what if I told you there's an ancient, battle-tested blueprint for an unshakable mind? A code for human resilience that wasn't written in some sterile lab, but forged in the fires of Roman politics, brutal military campaigns, and deep personal tragedy. I decided to put it to the test. For one intense week, I dove headfirst into this philosophy. I lived by 9 of its most powerful disciplines to see if they could actually build mental armor against the chaos of our modern world. This experiment pushed me to my absolute limits. It challenged my deepest beliefs about happiness and control, and the results, well, they weren't what I expected. This is the story of that week, and the secrets I uncovered. Discipline 1. The dichotomy of control. The whole thing kicked off on a Monday morning with the most fundamental and maybe the hardest Stoic discipline of all. The dichotomy of control. The philosopher Epictetus, who was born a slave and became one of the most respected thinkers of his time, put it simply, some things are up to us and some things are not. What's up to us are our choices, our actions, our judgments basically, our own stuff. What's not up to us is, well, almost everything else. Our bodies, our reputations, what other people do, and external events. The idea is simple, but putting it into practice changes everything. It's an instruction to perform mental triage on your life. Sort everything that stresses you out into 2 buckets, things I can control and things I can't. Then pour 100% of your energy into that first bucket and practice radical acceptance of the second. My first test came way faster than I expected. I got to work and found out a critical project, one I had poured weeks into, was completely derailed overnight by a decision from another department. My gut reaction? A hot surge of anger. I could feel my jaw clench. My mind started racing, composing furious emails in my head, pointing fingers, listing every single injustice. This was my old programming kicking in, outrage at the external, at things I couldn't control. But this was day 1. I took a breath. I physically stopped myself, found a quiet corner, and pulled out a notebook. I drew a line right down the middle of a page. On one side, I wrote, "Out of my control." On the other, "In my control." Under "Out of my control," I listed it out. The other team's decision, their reasons, the time we'd already lost, what my co-workers might be thinking. Just seeing it written down was weirdly calming. These things were facts, as unchangeable as the weather. My anger wasn't going to change any of them. Then I turned to the second column, "In my control." After a minute, the list started growing. My reaction to the news, how I communicate this setback to my team, my plan to adapt the project, the effort I put into salvaging our work, my attitude for the rest of the day. This wasn't about bottling up my frustration, it was about redirecting it. All that energy I was about to waste on pointless anger was now repurposed into focused action. I spent the next hour mapping out a new strategy. I called a quick, calm team meeting, explained what happened objectively, and laid out our new path forward. The anger was gone, replaced by a clear sense of purpose. By lunchtime, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a commander adapting on a changing battlefield. This one mental shift was the first crack of light in what would become a week of profound change. Discipline 2. Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. On Tuesday, I tackled a discipline that, on the surface, sounds pretty dark. Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils. The Roman philosopher Seneca, one of the richest men in the empire, was a huge advocate for this. He argued that we should actively and regularly imagine the worst-case scenarios. Picture losing your job, your money, your health, even the people you love. Now, our modern world tells us to do the exact opposite. We're told to think positive, visualize success, and affirm that everything will be great. But the Stoics saw a huge problem with that. Constant optimism leaves you fragile. When life inevitably hits you, you shatter. Premeditatio Malorum isn't about wallowing in misery, it's a psychological vaccine. By exposing yourself to a small imaginary dose of disaster, you build resilience to the real thing. You soften the emotional blow of loss, and you rehearse your response, so if the worst actually happens, you aren't paralyzed by shock. My experiment for Tuesday was to apply this to my career. I sat down for 20 minutes and vividly imagined being called into my boss's office and getting fired. I let myself feel that initial wave of panic, the fear of no income, the shame of telling my family, the stomach-churning uncertainty. It was really uncomfortable. But then, following the practice, I asked myself the key question, and then what? Okay, so I lost my job. What's my first step? I'd update my resume. Second step, reach out to my network. I started mentally listing old colleagues I could call. I thought about my freelance skills I could fall back on. I considered where I could trim my budget. What began as a terrifying thought exercise slowly turned into a strategy session. The big, scary monster of losing my job was being replaced by a concrete list of actions. By the end of those 20 minutes, something incredible had happened. My fear hadn't just faded, it was mostly replaced by a strange sense of confidence. I realized that while I really don't want to lose my job, I'd survive if it happened. I had a plan. This exercise also had a powerful side effect, massive gratitude. When I came back to my present reality, my job didn't feel like a given anymore. The tasks I had to do that day weren't burdens, they were opportunities. Seneca was right. By imagining losing what you have, you learn to truly love it. Discipline 3, Amor Fati, love your fate. Wednesday's discipline was maybe the most ambitious yet, Amor Fati, which is Latin for a love of your fate. This isn't just quietly accepting whatever happens. It's an active, enthusiastic embrace of every moment and every outcome, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as not just necessary, but desirable. The philosopher Nietzsche, who came much later, captured this idea perfectly. He said his formula for greatness was wanting nothing to be different, not in the future, not in the past, not for all eternity. To a Stoic, there are no bad events, only raw material. A setback is a chance to show courage. A betrayal is a lesson in resilience. A loss is a chance to practice wisdom. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote that a blazing fire turns everything you throw into it into more flame and brightness. He taught that a rational mind can turn any obstacle into fuel. My test of Amor Fati arrived in the form of a classic modern headache, tech failure. I had a huge presentation to finish, and my laptop just died. The blue screen of death. Hours of my work potentially gone. My first reaction was pure, unfiltered rage. I actually cursed at my computer. I felt that old victim mentality creeping in. Why does this always happen to me? And why right now? Then I remembered my task for the day, Amor Fati. I had to not just accept this, but love it. It felt insane. How could I possibly love this? I took a second and forced myself to reframe it. This isn't a disaster. This is training. The universe is just giving me a pop quiz to test my composure. What opportunity is hiding in this obstacle? First, it was a chance to practice detachment from my work and my reliance on tech. Second, it forced me to get creative. Could I recreate the presentation from memory on another computer? Could I explain the concepts without slides? Maybe that would be even better. Third, it was a chance to practice patience under pressure. So, I embraced it. I calmly took the laptop to IT, accepting that its fate was now out of my hands. Instead of stewing in anxiety while I waited, I grabbed a whiteboard and started sketching out the core ideas from scratch. The process was liberating. Without all the fancy templates and graphics, I had to focus on the pure strength of my message. When I finally got the laptop back hours later, the problem was fixed. But I found that my whiteboard version was clearer and more powerful than the original. The disaster had forced me to improve. It had become fuel. By the end of the day, I felt a weird sense of gratitude for the morning's crisis. It taught me that our suffering doesn't come from the event itself, but from our judgment that the event is bad. Amor Fati showed me that if you choose to, you can find an advantage in any disadvantage. Discipline 4. Voluntary discomfort. By Thursday, I was ready to move from the purely mental to the physical. Today's practice was voluntary discomfort. Seneca used to write to his friend Lucilius about how he would periodically practice poverty. He'd eat the plainest food, wear his roughest clothes, and sleep on the floor. The goal wasn't to punish himself. It was to rob hardship of its terror. We spend so much of our lives chasing comfort. We optimize everything, our temperature, our food, our entertainment. But the Stoics argued that this constant comfort makes us soft. We become terrified of the smallest inconvenience, a delayed flight, a bad night's sleep, feeling hungry. By willingly exposing ourselves to small, controlled doses of hardship, we toughen up our minds and bodies. You prove to yourself that you can handle it, and your fear of discomfort starts to shrink. I chose 2 discomforts for the day. First, a cold shower. I am someone who loves a long, hot shower. The idea of turning that knob to cold was genuinely awful. Standing there, hesitating, my brain came up with a dozen reasons not to do it. But that was the whole point. To do the thing you don't want to do. I turned the knob. The shock of the cold water was a full-body jolt. Every instinct screamed at me to jump out, but I made myself stay, breathing slowly and deliberately through the shock. After about 30 seconds, something shifted. My panicked breathing calmed down. My body, while still cold, started to adapt. My racing mind became intensely focused on the present moment. When I finally turned the water off, the feeling was incredible. A surge of energy, clarity, and most of all, a quiet pride. I had faced a tiny dragon and won. My second discomfort was skipping lunch. Around 1 p.m., the hunger pangs hit. My mind, which is conditioned to respond to that signal instantly, became obsessed with food. I felt irritable, distracted, but again, I just observed the feeling. I noted the sensation of hunger without judging it. I told myself, this is just a feeling. It is not an emergency. By 3 p.m., the intense hunger had passed, replaced by a low hum. I realized I was still able to work just fine. I proved to myself that I don't have to be a slave to every little bodily urge. The world didn't end because I missed a meal. These small acts of self-denial had a surprisingly big impact. They broke the automatic link between a desire and satisfying it. They expanded my window of what I could tolerate. The cold shower made me appreciate warmth. The hunger made my dinner taste better than it had in months. I learned you don't build toughness when things are easy. You build it by choosing the harder path, one small, uncomfortable step at a time. Discipline 5. Objective perception. Friday's discipline was about seeing things as they really are. The Stoics had a practice of applying objective judgment, stripping away all the emotional labels, the dramatic stories, and the personal opinions we layer on top of reality. Marcus Aurelius was a master at this. He would describe fine wine as just fermented grape juice, and his fancy royal robes as sheep's wool dyed with shellfish guts. He wasn't being a cynic. He was trying to see reality with piercing clarity, free from the emotional baggage that clouds our judgment. The point is, we don't react to events themselves, we react to our judgments about them. And those judgments are often what cause our pain. My experiment was to go through a whole day describing events to myself in the most neutral, boring language possible. The test came during a team meeting. A colleague presented an idea that completely contradicted a project I was passionate about. My immediate internal monologue was full of judgment. That's a terrible idea. He's trying to sabotage my project. This is a disaster. I could feel myself getting defensive. Then I applied the discipline. I paused and stripped away the labels. What actually happened? A person in a room spoke a series of words. These words represent a concept that differs from a concept I previously expressed. That's it. That's all that happened. He wasn't attacking me. His idea wasn't terrible. It was just different data. This simple shift completely diffused my emotional reaction. The heat in my chest just vanished. I was able to actually listen to the rest of his points without the filter of my own ego. Instead of planning a defensive counterattack, I found myself asking questions. Can you explain a bit more about how you see that working? What data led you to that? The conversation that followed was productive and collaborative, not a fight. I was able to evaluate his idea on its own merits, not on how it threatened me. I did this all day. The frustrating traffic jam wasn't infuriating. It was a large number of vehicles moving at a slower than ideal speed. An email from my boss wasn't demanding. It was a message with a request for a task to be done by a certain time. This practice showed me just how much of my daily stress was self-inflicted, a product of the dramatic stories I was telling myself about neutral events. By seeing the world without all that narrative, I felt a deep sense of calm. It was like taking off a pair of dirty glasses I didn't even know I was wearing. The world became simpler, clearer, and a lot less threatening. Discipline 6. Indifference to praise and criticism. Saturday was all about taking apart one of the most powerful forces in our lives, what other people think. The Stoics teach a radical indifference to both praise and criticism. Their argument is that if your self-worth depends on what other people say, you're basically a slave to everyone you meet. You've handed the key to your own happiness over to strangers. Epictetus was blunt about it. He said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." This doesn't mean you ignore all feedback. It means you evaluate it based on logic and reason, not on how it makes you feel. Your focus should be on your own character and living by your values. Whether people on the sidelines are cheering or booing is completely irrelevant. To test this, I decided to do something that practically begs for judgment. I posted an article I had written on a public forum known for its, let's say, harsh commenters. Normally, the thought of this would fill me with anxiety. I'd post something and then obsessively refresh the page, my mood swinging with every upvote and crashing with every negative comment. This time, I applied the discipline. I posted the article, and then I walked away. I put my phone in another room and went for a long walk. I told myself that the quality of my writing and the truth of my ideas didn't change based on what anonymous people on the internet thought. My goal was to act with virtue, to share something I thought was valuable. The outcome was not in my control. When I came back a few hours later, I took a deep breath and looked. As expected, it was a mixed bag. A few thoughtful, positive comments, one long, nitpicky, and pretty insulting critique, and a bunch of dismissive one-liners. The old me would have fixated on that one negative comment and let it ruin my day. But the Stoic in training did something different. I read the praise and just noted it. This person found my work valuable. That's nice. I read the insulting critique, and instead of feeling that sting of hurt, I scanned it for any kernel of truth. Is his point about my third paragraph valid? Maybe. I can think about that for next time. The rest of it, the personal stuff, I just discarded as noise. I read the dismissive comments and felt nothing. They were just data, a reflection of the commenter, not me. I felt this incredible sense of freedom. My peace of mind was no longer held hostage by the whims of others. By focusing on my own internal scorecard, did I act with courage and integrity. I had built a shield against the chaos of external opinion. It was a powerful realization. Self-respect is a fortress that no amount of criticism can ever break down. Discipline 7. Embrace solitude and reflection. After a week of intense mental and emotional work, Sunday's discipline felt like a deep, welcome exhale, embracing solitude and reflection. In our hyper-connected world, true solitude is rare. We often mistake it for loneliness. But for the Stoics, it was essential for a healthy mind. Seneca said we should withdraw into ourselves as much as possible, because it's in that quiet space that we can examine our thoughts, clarify our values, and reconnect with ourselves. We are constantly consuming information, entertainment, other people's opinions. This creates a deafening internal noise that makes self-awareness almost impossible. Solitude is the act of turning down the world's volume so you can finally hear yourself think. My experiment for the day was simple, but tough in its own way. 2 hours of complete sensory lockdown. No phone, no computer, no books, no music, just me, a notebook, and my own thoughts. The first 15 minutes were surprisingly rough. My mind, so used to constant stimulation, felt like a caged animal. I had a powerful urge to check my phone, turn on some music, to do anything to fill the silence. It was a wake-up call to how addicted to distraction I'd become, but I stuck with it. I just sat with the discomfort. And then, slowly, the storm started to calm down. The mental chatter slowed. Thoughts began to surface, not in a chaotic flood, but one by one, with a startling clarity. I took out my notebook and started a key Stoic exercise, the evening review. I asked myself 3 questions that Stoics like Seneca famously used. What did I do wrong this week? What did I do right? What duty is left undone? Reflecting on the week, I saw my emotional slips with new clarity. That flash of anger on Monday, the moment of panic on Wednesday. I could analyze them without beating myself up. I also saw my wins, the moment of control, the act of courage. I wasn't just remembering the week, I was processing it and pulling out the lessons. By the end of those 2 hours, I felt a sense of calm and centeredness that was deeper than anything I'd felt all week. The world outside hadn't changed, but my relationship to it had been reset. I realized that solitude isn't about escaping the world, it's about preparing yourself to engage with it better. By regularly making space for quiet, you make sure that you're the one writing your own script, not just reacting to the one the world hands you. Discipline 8. Study every emotional slip like a detective. As the week went on, I realized the goal of Stoicism wasn't perfection. It's impossible to never have an emotional reaction. The key is what you do after you slip. This brought me to the 8th discipline, one I found myself using all week, studying every emotional slip like a detective. The Stoics believed that destructive emotions like anger, fear, and jealousy all come from irrational judgments. So when you have an outburst, it isn't a sign of weakness, it's a data point. It's a clue that reveals a flawed belief you're holding onto. The goal is to investigate the crime scene of your emotional reaction with calm, forensic objectivity. What was the trigger? What was the underlying judgment? What irrational belief was at play? A perfect example happened on my drive home Friday. I was tired. A driver cut me off, forcing me to slam on my brakes. A wave of white-hot road rage washed over me. I laid on the horn and muttered a few choice words. It was a classic, uncontrolled emotional slip. A few minutes later, once my heart rate was back to normal, I applied the discipline. I became a detective, investigating my own anger. The trigger. Another car moved into my lane without warning. That's the objective fact. The emotion. Intense anger. The investigation. The why. Why did this neutral event produce such a powerful emotion? My first thought was, because he was wrong and what he did was dangerous. But that's still a judgment. I had to dig deeper. My anger came from a set of underlying beliefs. I believed people should drive properly. He disrespected me. My drive home should be smooth and easy. These are all irrational beliefs about how the world ought to be, not an acceptance of how it is. The world is full of imperfect drivers. His action wasn't a personal attack. It was probably just a moment of his own carelessness. My journey is not guaranteed to be easy. By breaking it down like this, I saw that my anger wasn't caused by the other driver. It was caused by my own entitled, irrational expectations. He was just the trigger. The gunpowder was my own flawed judgment. This practice is life-changing. Instead of just feeling bad about losing your temper, you learn from it. Every emotional slip becomes a lesson in self-awareness. You start to see the patterns in your own thinking. You realize that your anger often comes from feeling disrespected, or your anxiety comes from a need to control things you can't. Treating your setbacks as data instead of failures is the key to getting better over time. It turns every mistake and every moment of weakness into a stepping stone toward wisdom. Discipline 9. Memento Mori. Remember you must die. I saved the most profound discipline for last. Memento Mori. Remember, you must die. Like the premeditation of evils, this sounds grim, but it's actually the Stoics' ultimate tool for living a life filled with meaning and purpose. The constant awareness of our own death isn't supposed to be depressing. It's supposed to be clarifying. It's the one fact that cuts through all the trivial stuff, all the distractions, all the reasons we put things off. Knowing your time is limited is the ultimate motivation not to waste it. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This discipline is the antidote to the someday trap. We tell ourselves, we'll start that business someday. We'll have that important conversation someday. We'll finally appreciate the people we love someday. Memento Mori grabs you by the shoulders and tells you, there is only now. My practice for this last day was to keep the thought of my own mortality front and center. I found a small rock and put it in my pocket. Every time I touched it, I reminded myself, I am mortal. This day is a gift. The effect was immediate and powerful. It changed the entire texture of the day. That silly argument I was about to have with a family member over something trivial, it seemed utterly pointless in the face of death. Was this really how I wanted to spend my precious, limited time? I let it go. The urge to scroll mindlessly through social media. I looked at my phone and thought, is this worthy of one of the limited days I have on this earth? The answer was a hard no. I put the phone down and called a friend I hadn't talked to in months. Most powerfully, it infused my interactions with a sense of urgency and love. I looked at my family not as permanent fixtures, but as precious people I was lucky enough to share this brief journey with. It made me more present, more patient, and more loving. Memento Mori isn't about fear, it's about priority. It's the ultimate filter for your decisions. It forces you to ask the most important question: is this truly how I want to live? It strips away everything that isn't essential and leaves you with a raw, burning clarity. It is the secret to not just building mental toughness, but to living a life of genuine purpose. The transformation. After the experiment. So, after 1 week of living like a Stoic, what was the verdict? Did these 9 ancient disciplines actually work? The person who finished the week was not the same person who started it. The difference wasn't some loud, dramatic explosion, but a quiet, deep shift inside. The constant, low-grade anxiety that was the background noise of my life had faded. That feeling of being a helpless passenger, tossed around by external events, was gone. In its place was a new sense of agency and calm. The world hadn't changed. The chaos factory was still running at full speed. But I had built something inside of me, what the Stoics called an inner citadel. It's a fortress in your mind, a place of unshakable resilience that nothing on the outside can touch. The dichotomy of control gave me a tool to focus my energy. Negative visualization and voluntary discomfort didn't make me a pessimist. They made me more grateful and resilient. Amor Fati turned every obstacle into an opportunity. Objective perception cleared the fog of my own drama. Indifference to opinion freed me from the prison of needing approval. And Memento Mori gave me a compass for a life of purpose. I learned that Stoicism isn't about being emotionless or becoming a robot. It's about learning to detach from destructive emotions so you can experience the good ones, like joy and gratitude, even more fully. It is a practical, active training system for your mind. This 1-week experiment proved to me that this ancient philosophy isn't just an academic subject. It is a powerful, practical toolkit for thriving in the modern world. These 9 disciplines aren't quick fixes. They are deep practices that, when you use them consistently, can genuinely change how you experience your life. They can help you build the mental toughness, resilience, and inner peace that so many of us are searching for. The journey doesn't end here. This is a lifelong practice. But if my week taught me anything, it's that the power to transform your mind is, and always has been, entirely within your control. Now, I have a challenge for you. You don't have to try all 9 at once. But what if you just tried one? If you were to pick just one of these disciplines to practice for a single week, which one would it be? Would you practice the dichotomy of control at work? Try a cold shower? Would you try to love a setback with Amor Fati? Let me know in the comments below. I'd genuinely love to hear which one speaks to you. And if you found this guide valuable, and you want more practical wisdom to help you thrive, make sure to subscribe and join the community. Your journey to an unshakable mind starts now.